2 weeks away, Rube. I promise we're almost there.
Before we start, can we just talk about how beautiful it is out?
It is beautiful. I have my window open. I'm team no air conditioning until like May, so the windows are open. It's a little steamy, but if you hear birds or something, or people yelling or sirens, that's why.
Be careful of those sirens. You never know when they're coming to get you, Dave.
I should mention this is the Eagle Eye Podcast. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, I did something yesterday that I'm pretty proud of. So I had my windows open and I walk in my bedroom and I see a wasp or a hornet. It was something big and scary looking. And I see it on the screen and I think, oh, it must be on the outside. And then I take a closer look. It's on the inside of the screen. So there's nothing preventing it from just flying in my house. So I run over there and I close the window. But now I've got this wasp trapped between the screen and the window. And I'm like, well, I just lost a window. That can't do it. So I had to like sneak open the bottom of my window, like as much as just so my fingers could fit in there, open the screen, and in one motion close the window as the hornets or whatever it is flying down. And I got them out.
That's really advanced stuff right there. So how long was the entire motion of like open, close?
It was very quick, fractions of a second. The entire process of me building up the courage to do it, and there were a few false starts on my part, that took a little longer than I'd like to admit.
You pulled the trigger, you did it, you made the move, and we're all very proud of you.
Thank you. No sarcasm in there at all. We have a lot to do today. We did 7th round picks on Tuesday's podcast. Today we're going to do the 6th round and the 5th round, the best and worst picks under Howie Roseman. We're going to take a look at that number 30 pick. Look, we don't know where the Eagles are going to pick, if they're going to make both selections. We think they probably won't, but we've done so much focusing on number 10. I mean, number 30 is still a chance to add a really valuable player. So we'll go over some possibilities, positions, and players for that pick. But Rube, I thought today we would start with a position possibility in the first round that I don't think we've probably talked about enough, especially given what we know about the Eagles. It's offensive line.
Yeah, and we know at some point, probably in the first 2 days, how he's going to take an offensive lineman, if not more. And with Sam Malo leaving, Cam becomes a starter, most likely. Dillard leaving, you lose a good measure of your depth. So it's really the first time in a long, long time that they don't have this kind of big stable of backups that you feel really good about. They have a couple backups, who are okay, but it's I think it's time to start replenishing it, and I'd be surprised if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, maybe not surprised in the first round, but certainly early in this draft, they want to replenish. And you have Jason Kelce, who's 35, Lane Johnson, who's 33, who are both playing at a really high level, but it's not going to last forever. This could be Kelce's last season. We don't think it's going to be Lane's last season, but he's getting nearer to the end. And it's kind of their style to replenish before it's a desperate need. They don't ever want it to be a desperate need. And we've seen that the last 2 drafts, really. I mean, Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson were drafted in the 2nd round, and there was not an immediate need. They ended up playing Dickerson as a rookie, but that wasn't the plan until Brandon Brooks got hurt, and then Isaac Seumalo got hurt as well. That wasn't the plan. I mean, the plan was to kind of give him a redshirt year. He was coming off the ACL, but ended up starting 13 games that year. And then Cam last year, it worked to plan. He didn't play because everyone stayed healthy, but they've even going back to like Lane Johnson, drafting him to be a left tackle when they didn't need a left tackle. They've shown that they'll do this. They'll stock up on a position they care about, even if the need isn't major right then.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that Jeff Stoutland just signed a contract extension, and it's such a luxury to have that mind, that brain, that motivator, that teacher and know he's going to be here for any lineman you draft this year, next year. We'll see how long he wants to keep coaching, but that's such a plus. And any of these guys will tell you. I mean, it's we talked to Stout was a big deal at the Super Bowl, and a lot of there was a kind of a unusual emphasis on the Eagles O-line you don't really see with offensive lines in Arizona, just because of Kelsey, because Lane, a couple, obviously Dickerson made the Pro Bowl, his first year full-time starter. So there was a lot of emphasis on the O-line, and you hear these guys talk about Stoutland from Kelsey all the way down to the last guy on the roster, and they just, I mean, you don't really hear players talk about the impact position coaches make on their lives and their careers, but these guys, I mean, it's, they've had a couple misses, but really, as far as day one and day two picks, and I'm not going to call Dillard a miss because, I mean, look, he just got a big contract. He's a good player. And you think about how far he's come under Stoutland. I mean, you think about how far Dickerson came and how far all these guys have come under him. So you have this kind of secure feeling when you draft an offensive lineman that he's in really, really good hands. And whatever technique issues he has, consistency issues, it's going to get better. It's going to get a lot better.
Yeah, you feel good about it. But one thing I hear a lot that I don't think is fair is that I'll hear some fans say, well, the Eagles don't need to draft offensive linemen high because they can get guys wherever and Stout will coach them up and they'll become good players. And I think there's like a modicum of truth to that, right? Like he does do well with these players that they find wherever. But the idea is like you want to be the best possible. You care about this position so much. And if he can make average players good, good players great, great players Hall of Famers, then you still want to give him great players and get the most out of them. So I understand that line of thinking. I don't agree with it though.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, and I could see how you could think that, but and look, guys like, I mean, I think of Big V, I guess Kelsey and Mulata were all 5th, 6th, or 7th round picks, but your odds of getting an all-pro lineman in the first round are still, and not that those guys are, 2 of them are not all pros, but your odds of getting a starter are a lot better in the first round than in the later rounds, whether you have Stoutland or, whoever your offensive line coach is. So it's an interesting theory, but I'm not buying that. I do like his chances of getting a guy in the 5th round and making him better and maybe making him a starter. But I'd rather take the stud. I mean, Dickerson, I mean, what are your odds of finding a talent like that, an interior lineman like that in the 5th round? That's not going to happen.
I mean, the only reason they found him in the 2nd round was because of that injury history. So,
right.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, talent prevails, and you can get talented players, like really talented players late in the draft. It's just more uncommon, and it's your best bet is to get them early, and the Eagles generally do that. It's funny though, we always hear like they build in the trenches. You look back at their 1st round picks. I mean, defensive line has started to lap offensive line. What do you think? Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know if there is one answer. I was looking at that trend. I don't have an answer. Unless it's just that edge rushers and interior rushers have just become kind of I don't know. I mean, there's just such an emphasis on those positions, but that's true of the O-line too. So I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah, it might be there might not be a real reason. It could be that just so happens that the way it's lined up for them has been defensive players. But I think there has something to do with like the rotation on defense. If you draft, we're talking about it this year, like if you draft your 4th edge player, he's going to play. He's not going to have to redshirt. You're going to get something from him immediately. You're always using those players, whereas on the offensive line, you do have to wait sometimes for an injury. And if you don't get one, you get a redshirt season like we saw with Cam Jurgens last year, which is fine. I mean, that's still the best case scenario, but you don't get to see your draft pick play.
What do you think they're more likely to do go interior or tackle, or obviously, ideally, a combo guy. But what do you think? What do you think the priority is?
And you mean offensive line?
Yeah,
Um, I look at it like, especially when you're drafting high, it you want versatility, sure, but I lean toward tackle. It's still the more important position, and ideally, like you'd get a tackle who can play guard and not someone who's a guard only or best project. So, like, let's talk about the names a little bit. Peter Skoronsky, it might be the best offensive lineman in this draft. Might not even be there to talk about that pick number 10. I'm hesitant to say the Eagles should take him because he best projects as a guard, and I don't love taking a guard in the top 10. I know there are exceptions. Like you get Quentin Nelson, you have this all pro player immediately, like sure, but I feel much better taking a tackle who you can play a guard.
yeah. No, I mean there is a school of thought that he's going to be a pretty good tackle eventually.
Short little arms,
Short arms.
shorter arms than Cam Jurgens.
Yeah, that's true. Um, that's a concern, but um, he's going to be a top 10 player or top 12 player. Um, would I take him at 10? Probably not.
Oh, really? If he's there?
If he's there, I probably wouldn't.
Okay. And then the other two, I think, who are probably in that range are Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State and then Broderick Jones from Georgia. Paris Johnson has played guard before. So, I mean, if you draft him in the first round, you're probably plugging and playing him at right guard, which sends Cam Jurgens back to the bench. But he can handle that. He's played guard before. He's also played tackle. And then Broderick Jones, I don't believe has that guard background, but given the athlete he is, I kind of just think he would figure it out, or at least he'd compete for it.
Right.
He's a fun player. I mean, he's probably the most athletic of the three. He's a monster, and he kind of fits the mold of what I think you'd want in the first round.
Yeah, I think he's I mean, he's a great athlete. He's fun to watch. I'm I wonder. I think there's a really, and I'm just going back to what you said about Cam Jurgens going back to the bench. I think there's a lot of value in Jurgens playing right guard this year, and in anticipation of him being the center, most likely next year. I mean, who knows what Jason's going to do? But do you want to sit him for a rookie who might be a little bit better guard, might be suited to guard, and not play Cam Jurgens and not get him a year of experience? Obviously, at a different position than he'll eventually play. I don't know. I mean, you want to put the five best out there.
I mean, if they draft a guy at 10, he's playing.
If they draft a guy at 10, he's going to play. But if they draft a guy at 30,
then I think you maybe have a competition.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would be a terrible thing.
No, I have no problem with that. We know,
especially for us. I'd get to watch guard reps at training camp every day. Sign me up.
And we know Nick likes competition. It's written on every wall in the building. So you know how well, never mind. But yeah, if you take him at 30 or early in the second, if you end up there, but I just think I do think there's a lot of value to Jurgens getting reps.
I agree with that. And I think he has the ability to play guard. And that's kind of a little bit of a blind faith thing with him because we haven't seen it. But given he's almost the exact same build as Isaac Seumalo, and I think his intelligence will help. The one thing I'd be curious to see is we heard for so long that Isaac out there was kind of like a second center. Like he's calling out things. He's acting like a center a lot of the times. Curious to see what Cam Jurgens would look like, especially being a young player. But I think there would be a benefit to being on the field with Kelsey and getting a chance to see that up close. It's different than seeing it on the sideline.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No, and you're right. I mean, we all kind of just see here and say, well, Jurgens will be the right guard. We don't know. We've never seen him other than a rep here and there. I like the way he carries himself. I love his confidence. I love his swagger. He says all the right things. He does all the right things. You don't hear a bad thing about him when it comes to locker room or practice. He's clearly a bright guy. So and physically he's got the tools. It's just a matter of putting it all together. And there's certainly been guys who have all those things and can't put it together. We've seen that. So I think he'll be okay. I can't think of a reason he wouldn't be, but until we see it, and I think we'll know as training camp goes on, we'll be able to tell, especially if you're logging every rep he takes.
Does having him change your outlook at all, though? So, like, say, do you weigh the positions different in the early rounds knowing you have Cam Jurgens? Like, would you be more hesitant to draft a guy who you would feel obligated to play at right guard because you have Cam?
I don't think so, because Cam's going to be playing center next year. Either way.
We sure?
Probably. Look, Cam might he might be a free agent in 2 years and have never been a starter if Jason keeps coming back, which would be fine. But look, I think every year it becomes a little more likely that Kels is going to retire. So we don't know. We don't know the answer to that, but I don't think I would do anything differently. I don't think you can go that way. I would, if I felt really strongly about the player, if Cam had started a couple years and was playing at the same level as Dickerson, maybe you felt like, maybe then, but I wouldn't not draft a guy who I saw as a elite interior lineman because of Cam Jurgens.
Yeah, I generally agree with you. I was just kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit. But when they drafted Cam, it was the one thing that gave me a little bit of pause was that, like, what if Kelsey comes back? And now he comes back, and we're all kind of penciling him in at guard. If you have to sit Cam Jurgens for 2 seasons, I mean, that's half of his rookie contract.
Right.
At a certain point, like, you worry about, are you getting the most out of your draft pick if you're redshirting him for half of it? And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves because right now he is penciled in the start there, but that's something I do worry about. If you're trying to maximize these rookie deals and you have a second-round pick potentially not playing for 2 years, and that's the scenario we'd be setting up here if they draft an offensive lineman this high, I do worry about that a little bit.
Well, if the reason he's not playing center is because you have the best center in history playing, then I guess you can live with it. But, I think when they drafted him, they just didn't have answers to these questions. They just didn't know. I have no problem with the pick. I think the odds were pretty good he was going to retire after last year. And we'll talk about your story a little later, but I just don't – I have no problem with the pick because there were just so many unknowns. And he's – they liked him that much. And whatever happened, Kelsey was in his mid-30s, and it just made sense at the time. And I still like it. Plus, you knew he had the capability of playing guard as well. So
I don't know if they knew that. I still don't know if they know that.
They were pretty confident. I mean, they talked about it at the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, they didn't know it, but I think they believed it.
Yeah. And there will be some options in the second round, too. I mean, we're spending a lot of time on the first round, but they had that second round pick. They have a third round pick. More opportunity for offensive linemen, and that's where you can kind of get some versatility, a guy who can play a couple spots, and we've seen them do that before. In what was Jack Driscoll, 4th round? They tried it with Prince Tega in the 5th or 6th round. They'll try.
He was a 6.
Big V was a 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'll talk about Big V in a little bit here when we get to the 5th round picks, but that's where Stoutland comes in. You're like, all right, get these guys who are day 3 picks and turn them into legitimate backup options like Driscoll. But you still need to give them some top-end talent, too.
Yeah. Sam Howell is the only offensive lineman they've drafted in the 3rd round since Andy's first year. Doug Brzezinski was a 3rd rounder.
And Isaac took a while.
It took a while.
I mean, we give Isaac credit. They tried to play him in 2017 and they had to bench him.
Yeah. He wasn't awful. He wasn't.
He had an awful game. It was one awful game against Grady Jarrett.
Yeah.
At the Falcons game.
A lot of people do.
Actually, that was the next year, wasn't it?
think that was 18. I can't remember, but
I'll find
um,
it.
I just remember. Yeah, I don't know. That was too long ago for me to remember, but it did take him. It did take him a little bit. Um,
Because 2017, like that was obviously Super Bowl year, and they really wanted to start him, and he wasn't ready for it. He simply wasn't ready. And they remember they went the Chance Warmack first,
that's right.
and that didn't last very long.
Yeah, he was
Chance
awful.
Warmack, the number 10 overall pick, who was a guard, by the way.
Yeah,
And then they went to Stefan Wisniewski, who wasn't their first choice because he's somewhat limited, but they just needed something steady, and he gave them something steady.
what a disastrous pick Chance Warmack was.
Yeah, and when the Eagles brought him in, you thought, well, he's back with Jeff Stoutland, and maybe someone will be able to. If anyone can get the most out of Chance Warmack, it's Stout, and even he couldn't.
Chance Warmack started 3 years with the Titans, and that's who drafted him 10th overall in 13, and started 5 more games the rest of his career. Was out of football at 27, and he was a legendary college player. He was,
It was great, yeah.
yeah. But anyway, that's a little off topic.
You didn't have Chance Warmack on your list today?
He's on my list every week.
Yeah, fair. Number 30. We said we'd do this. We have some options, and we both just came up with a list of 3 guys we think would make some sense at 30. The pick that doesn't get enough love. We're all talking about number 10. Are they going to get Jalen Carter? Are they going to trade up, trade down? Are they going to take Bijan Robinson? Let's talk about 30 a little bit. We each have 3 names. We'll just ping pong this back and forth a little bit. Give me a name, Rube.
Well, one name I have on my list is B.J. Ojulari, LSU edge rusher. We all know his brother, second-round pick of the Giants a couple of years ago, Z's. I think he's a better prospect than his brother, better player than his brother. Certainly, there's some real depth of edge rushers in this draft. I think that'd be a pretty good place to get one. So he's definitely on my list. I really think they're going to come out of this with an edge rusher pretty early.
Yeah, I like him. He kind of plays like Azeez Ojulari, who I remember that year got some first-round buzz, didn't end up going that high, but he's become a really good player.
BJ has, you mean?
No, Azeez.
Oh, yeah, he's all right.
He was better. I remember I was getting ready for the Giants last year, watching them a little bit, and there was a lot of emphasis on Kayvon Thibodeau. I was watching him. Azeez Ojulari is better than Thibodeau. At least last year he was.
Yeah, it'll be fun to have them both in the division. But he's an interesting guy. Good production. You wonder. I think they list him at like 6'2", which maybe a few years ago that would concern you, but we've seen guys 6'2" be really productive, including one guy who had 16 sacks for this team last year. So that doesn't really scare me. He's a nice player.
Yeah, the size at this point, we've seen the Eagles. It's nice. Like, we know that size won't cross somebody off the list because they have an edge rusher who is undersized and who was drafted as an off-ball linebacker in Hassan Reddick. So whether you're talking about,
I mean, BG's played, made a career out of being 6'2".
yeah, BG's 6'2", but he's 6'2" wide too. He's just a little bowling ball out there.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll give you a name. Adetomiwa Adebawore from Northwestern. Maybe a little early for him at 30, but I think he's going to go higher than people expect. He's kind of an athletic freak, but he's had 2 really good years in Northwestern, 9.5 sacks in the last 2 years. He's 6'1", 281, so kind of a strange build. He played edge at Northwestern. I think he's probably going to play a little bit of edge in the NFL level, but play inside. He has some versatility. And we've seen the Eagles kind of like those players, whether it's Milton Williams, the aforementioned BG, who plays inside sometimes. So having a guy like Adebawore who can –
Kentavious Street is kind of –
a little bit, yeah, sure. Like same size from a size dimension makeup. Like Adebawore is not going to be your backup nose tackle behind Jordan Davis. There are other options for that. in the draft. But if he can be a 3-tech, if you can slide him out to the 5-tech, maybe 4-eye at a time, like he can play up and down the line a little bit for you. And the athleticism's freaky. He ran a sub 4.5 40. Yeah. So this is a good tidbit. He's the first player in NFL history to run a sub 4.5 over 280 pounds.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's crazy athleticism. And look, you don't, if it was just the athleticism, it would give you pause because you don't want the combine warriors, but he went to the Senior Bowl and showed out. And we know the Eagles care about the Senior Bowl. So I think he makes a lot of sense.
All right, I'll give you I'm going to go O-line here since we're talking O-line. Osiris Torrance. I love the name. It sounds like some guy from like the Middle Ages. Osiris. Florida. He only played 1 year at Florida. He was at Louisiana Lafayette, and their coach went to Florida, and he went with him, Billy Napier. 6'5", 330, interior lineman. We just talked earlier about, replenishing that position, and I think he's a guy who would make sense there at the end of the first round, and another project for Stout.
Yeah, I like that name. There's a few guys like offensive linemen in the late first round, early second round. Cody Mauch, another one from North Dakota State, who might make sense. He's not on my list though. So my next guy is Cam Smith from South Carolina. I seem to be higher on Cam Smith than most people. I like him as a cornerback kind of right after that initial 3. And I think the consensus top 3 are pretty well defined at this point. It's Gonzalez, it's Witherspoon, it's Porter. I have Cam Smith right behind them. He's SEC battle tested, good frame. He's 6'1", 180, so a little slight, but really aggressive, ton of pass breakups in college. I think he'd be an ideal fit to sit a year behind Darius Slay and James Bradbury.
Slay.
And he would be and he'd be a good fit there. I think he can play inside a little bit too. I don't think he's an outside only guy. Probably an outside guy, but I think he could grow into a starter role eventually. South
Carolina's really developed some corners lately. His best friend is Joe Horn, who J.C. Horn, his former
his
teammate.
Best friend is his buddy's dad.
Yes, J.C. Horn. Obviously, Stephon Gilmore. Your guy, Jonathan Joseph, right? South Carolina.
J-Joe, yeah.
Fastest
talker in the world.
Is that right?
Jonathan Joseph, yeah. He used to there are 2 people who I've really had to utilize the slow playback feature on my recorder for. Jonathan Joseph and Chip Kelly.
Chip Kelly, definitely. Yeah. There were
J-Joe's a faster talker.
A lot of words in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them you didn't really make sense, but they were there. And you had to sort through them to try to find some meaning. But he's a good one. And I like the idea of a corner there. I think this first round has some pretty good depth at cornerback.
Yeah, there are a lot of good corners, and they're gonna make it into the second round, which is maybe why you don't want to do it at 30. I think a lot of these names that we're saying kind of bring home the idea of trading back, because I think the caliber of player at 30 might be there at 35, might be there at 40. So if you can add some extra draft picks, move down and get your player or that range of player, I think it makes a lot of sense. But I like Cam Smith. I'd put him above, the Ringo or Forbes, or even I like Banks from Maryland. But all those guys I think are kind of in that next tier. I'd have Cam Smith at the top of that list.
Do you think Deonte Banks is you have him 4th in that group?
Yeah. I like him. Forbes scares me because he's so slight. He's like 165 pounds. Keely Ringo is the one who, it's intriguing because he is a freak. He is 207 pounds, super fast. Some people are saying he might be better as a safety eventually in the NFL. Super raw. Someone's going to probably overdraft him for the traits, but I don't blame them because the ceiling is pretty high on him.
My third guy for that 30th spot is Will McDonald, the fourth, another edge rusher, Iowa State guy. Um, Played a lot of football at Iowa State, at 33 sacks over the last 4 years, second most in the BCS to Will Anderson, who had like twice that many. But really productive guy, 6'4", 240, 245. So tall, rangy guy, long arms, really productive player.
All right, my last one is just fun for me, and just let me enjoy this a little bit. I don't think it's likely, but I don't think it's out of the question either.
Okay.
Darnell Washington, tight end from Georgia. Dude is a freak. 6'4", 264. Moves better than any guy who's 264 pounds should move. And I know tight end is not a massive need, but this is a really good tight end class. And we've seen the Eagles do this before. Zach Ertz had played 5 seasons when the Eagles drafted Dallas Goedert. Guess how many seasons Dallas Goedert is in right now? He just finished his 5th. And Goddard's actually,
yeah, I think I forget where he's the exact same age as Ertz was when they
Goddard's older.
Goddard. Is that right?
Goddard's older than Ertz was when they drafted Goddard. So, and look, maybe the way things ended with Zach, they're like, we don't want to do that again. So maybe they've learned a lesson there, but I don't think so. I think it worked out well for them.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of Darnell Washington. He'd play immediately as a second tight end. You look at this spot, I don't think like there are some guys who are great pass catchers that might not make sense because you're going to need to block if you're in there in 12 personnel. Well, guess what? Guy who's 6'6", 264 can block too. So it would give that 12 personnel some teeth. It would make them very multiple on offense. As much as like adding a running back in the first round, like I thought about Jahmyr Gibbs here, and that would be fun. I think Darnell Washington is just as much fun.
Yeah, and we talk about needs. We're always talking about, we never list tight end as a need, but like unless you think Grant Calcaterra or Jack Stoll is going to, become a, significant contributor, it is. This team's won a lot of games with 2 big-time tight ends, whether it was Selleck and Ertz or Ertz and Goddard.
Yeah, and I think when I listed the needs,
Matt Schobel and I'm sorry.
I just wrote about this. I put tight end kind of lower on the list because they lost a running back, they lost a receiver, so it's like those have to be above it. But to me, it's almost like a sneaky need, and they're probably higher on Jack Stoll than I am or the general public is because they like that he plays his role, he does it well, but he's a limited player, and adding a really good tight end who has dual capabilities to an offense that already has Dallas Goedert. Yes, he'd be a part-time player, but this whole roster is so stacked that just about anyone you draft is going to be a part-time player. I'm fine with it.
I don't really think Jack Stoll is a good enough blocker that you can really, I don't know. He's okay. It's not like he's like world-class blocker.
Give me Darnell Washington out there next to Lane Johnson.
Woo. Do you know who the last Eagles first-round pick was who wasn't a lineman, a quarterback, or a wide receiver, or a corner?
What do we got left there?
What does that leave? That leaves running back, linebacker, safety, tight end.
Okay, so they've never drafted a safety. Linebacker was 1979. Running back was 86. Was it tight end?
Yeah, Keith Jackson in 88.
88. Okay.
Yeah. Which, yeah, I mean, I mean, I guess that's not totally shocking, but it is a little bit. No safeties, no running backs, no linebackers, no tight ends. I mean, 88 is a long time ago. That's so long ago. You know what I was doing in 1988? I was covering the Eagles.
You know what I was doing?
I'm afraid to ask.
Being born. Busy being born.
I like that pick though.
Yeah, it's fun, and I don't think it's as crazy as some people might think it is.
I don't either.
Because he's a guy who would play immediately.
And I mean, I think we all agree they need a weapon beyond Goddard, Devontae, and AJ. They need whether it's a running back, whether it's a receiver, whether it's a tight end. They need another weapon.
Mm-hmm. And the problem with it being a receiver is it's going to take away legitimate targets for AJ Brown or Devontae Smith. But if it's a 6'6" guy, guess where his targets can come? They can come in the red zone, or at least he can draw some attention in the red zone. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, I like it.
Catch all the sports action and more at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Whether it's the money line or the pass line, there's something for everyone in a great sports book. Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Philly loves a winner. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Rube, we did 7th-round picks earlier in the week. It's time for 6th-round picks under Howie Roseman, and then we'll get to the 5th-rounders. We're working our way up to the 1st round, but we'll start off with the 6th round today. Let's start off with the best 6th-rounders, and then we'll go to the worst 6th-rounders. I think I have a sneaky suspicion here that we're going to have the same number 1.
Yeah, Sean Bradley. Maybe the best 6th-round pick in NFL history. Jason Kelce. How he talked about he got us when he was on Kelce's pod, on the Kelce's pod, he talked about drafting Jason. It was really interesting. But yes, hard to believe. Guy's going to go in the Hall of Fame as a 6th-round pick. You try to find stories from draft day about Jason Kelce, and nobody mentioned him. He was one of those in other picks, one of the best 6th-round picks ever.
What round do you think he would get drafted in if he came out of college now?
If he came out of college now?
Yeah, if he was a draft prospect.
But it's like the same size and the same.
Yeah, he's him. But he's coming out now.
I mean, people wouldn't know how good he is.
No, I'm saying he's already existed once. And he's, you know what I mean? Like,
he's already existed.
He's already existed. So I'm saying in the NFL that he's helped create, where undersized centers are not a complete outlier, where do you think he would get?
Well, the knock on him, and it was his size, but he was bigger. I mean, he was pretty big when he came out of Cincinnati. He was talking about that on that pod. He was heavy. I mean, he wasn't in great shape. He wasn't super fit. He was just heavier. But also he had some like character questions that hurt him in the draft. He talked about it. He's like, yeah, I was getting in fights all the time. And
I mean, honestly, they were spot on. I saw him beat the hell out of that trash can a couple years ago.
Yeah, that was we've seen Jason get angry.
There's a temper there for sure. He's done a good job of not letting it boil over on the football field when it matters, but like it's there.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen it a couple times. Like when he had to go in the blue tent once, he did not like that. But I mean, if he came out of Cincinnati now the same as he was when he came out in 2010 or 2011, 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I was saying 2nd or 3rd. I mean, he's kind of Cam Jurgens-ish.
Yeah. But I think if people knew he was going to be a Hall of Famer, they take him sooner.
Well, yeah. It's amazing though how he's really changed the perception of the position, and it was such a stark contrast between him and Jamal Jackson, who was the center when he got here. Jamal was a good player, but he was just your kind of hit it down the fairway, big bulky center of a previous NFL era, and it was Howard Mudd who was just on top of it. Late great Howard Mudd. Yeah. Okay. Number 2. Who do you have at number 2?
Yeah, I think there's a big drop here.
Well, yeah, and this is not a knock on the other guys. It's just a naturally big drop.
I went with Quez.
Me too.
Yeah, and it's really rare to have a wide receiver who's makes this kind of impact. And I know people were disappointed. And he was disappointed. And, we were all disappointed in his season. He took a big step backwards, but still, just to have a 6th-round pick wide receiver making any impact is unusual. And he's made one. And I think he does fit into their plans for next year. We'll see. We'll see what happens, obviously, in the draft and in the preseason. But I think he's got to be number 2.
Yeah, I have number 2 as well. Number 3, I have Matt Pryor.
Did you go Matt Pryor? I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I get it. He's carved out a decent career for himself, and the Eagles did trade him when they were done with him. Well,
yeah.
All right, who do you have at number 3?
I have Sean Bradley.
Okay, I have him at number 4.
I have Sean Bradley. He's a Pro Bowl alternate special teamer. So, and he was on that RV relay team that set the school record and won at Penn Relays.
Well, there it is. Yeah.
4x4.
Yeah. So who'd you have at number 4?
This was not easy. I went Brian Roll.
Brian Roll. Natural leverage, as Jim Schwartz would say.
Yeah, he was a starter for a year.
It was him or Jamar Chaney. So
yeah. So who do you have next?
Brian Roll did not make my list. I had Blake Countess at 5.
He never played for the Eagles.
Yeah, I know.
He played for the Rams. I had Grant Calcaterra 5 just because he had that 45-yard catch, and maybe he'll have another catch one day.
Yeah, it was tricky after that. You're right. I mean, Brian Roll played, but it wasn't very good.
No, well, that's why I couldn't put Matt Pryor on.
Yeah,
he was awful.
When they tried to play him at left tackle. Can't play left tackle.
He tried to play an offensive lineman at left tackle. Didn't go well.
He's carved out a decent career.
He's not in Indy anymore. Was he San Francisco?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know that.
He signed with somebody. I think it might have been the Niners.
Okay. The worst 6th-round picks, and you can, whatever order you want to do here. I went Brandon Washington as the worst.
He was my second worst. I had Charles Scott first.
Well, they actually traded Charles Scott for Jorrick Calvin, who played here. So I put him on the value chart a little higher.
Isn't Jorrick Calvin the guy who caught that kickoff and just ran around the end zone?
Probably. Yeah.
Jorrick Calvin. He was a good dude. I like Jorrick Calvin. I'm just going to tell you the 5 I have because I just got to make sure none of them were in 15. Oh, yeah, one of them was 15. I got to take him off. I had Randall Evans on my list, but he was a chip guy. I had Marvin
Randall Evans was the guy who was driving Uber when he was playing here.
That's right. But I had Charles Scott, Brandon Washington, Jacoby Stevens, and Marvin McNutt. Jacoby Stevens and Marvin McNutt were both guys who I thought might have a chance to do something, to at least make the bottom of the roster. We were kind of high on Stevens, but obviously that didn't work out. I guess I have to replace Randall Evans. I'll just put Ja'Cory Shepherd on there.
Okay.
So I'll have a Ja'Cory and a Jacoby.
Yeah, I had Jacoby Stevens on my list too. Yeah, I really thought they were going to have a way to use him. We had him on the show. We had him on Eagle Eye. Nice kid. It didn't work out for him. Got hurt in his rookie training camp. I think really put him behind. He never caught up. Marvin McNutt was on my list. And then I just realized I had Marvin McNutt twice. So I'll scramble and put Elijah Qualls on there.
Marvin McNutt just, he – like the first week of training camp, like the first few days before the pads went on, he had really good size and he was, he looked great. Oh, this guy, man, this guy's, once the pads went on, it was over.
Yeah. All right. You want to go to the 5th round?
Yeah.
Best 5th round pick. I mentioned him earlier. To me, it's still Big V.
Yeah. I have him second.
Okay.
He started the Super Bowl, so you can't take that away from him. I went Riley Cooper.
Did you really that high?
Yeah. He wasn't bad. I mean, the guy had we had 2,500 receiving, 18 touchdowns, averaged 14 yards a catch. That 1 year in 13, he had 835 yards. I don't want to get into a political discussion, but as a player,
Not politics.
what's that?
Not politics.
Yeah, as a player, he wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Um,
But
I, I,
but he ended up being a bad locker room influence on that team. I mean, you had Kerry Williams trying to fight him at practice. I mean, that matters.
yeah, I'm just looking at the numbers, and that was at the end. That was like, what year was that? That
Well,
was,
he got a contract extension after all that.
yeah, yeah, that probably was a mistake.
Yeah.
But before the Kenny Chesney concert, he was pretty good.
Yeah, I had him third on my list.
Okay. I have Gainwell third. I have Big V second and Gainwell third.
Yeah, I had Big V, then Gainwell, then Riley. Could Gainwell pass Big V this year?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he could.
Yeah, I think if he has a good first 3 games, I'll bump him up.
3 games?
Yeah, if he has say he has like 60 scrimmage yards in each of the first 3 games, then I bump him up to number 2.
Then he already passes the starting left tackle in the Super Bowl? Wow.
Gainwell starting running back in the Super Bowl.
Number 4.
I went Nate Gary number 4.
Nate Gary did not make my list.
Really?
Yeah.
He wasn't the worst player ever. He just wasn't very good.
I had a weird moment with Nate Gary. He was on Washington this year, and they were playing up here. And I think he was on the practice squad. I didn't think he was playing. Like I knew Nate Gary well enough to like say hi to him, but like he walked over and he was saying hi to a bunch of his former teammates, and he was like giving them bro hugs. And then he saw me, and I think he just like gave me a bro hug too because he had just seen the former players, and he walked away. And I was like, I don't think I know Nate Gary that well to get a hug
That's
from him
kind of
before the
awkward.
game. Yeah. Nice enough guy. And you're right. He was a special teamer who got put in an unfair spot as a starter. He wasn't a starter.
No. But he did have a pick 6 off Luke Falk. So
he did. I had Wendell at number 4.
I had Wendell number 5.
Yeah. Okay. And then at 5, I had Dennis Kelly.
Yeah, Dennis Kelly, I mean, he would have made mine overall. He really had a nice career. What did he play? 8, 9 years?
Yeah. He played a little bit here.
Played a little bit here. I think I'm going to move Smallwood up to 4 over Nate Gary. He was, Wendell Smallwood was a functional player, scored some touchdowns. He had over 1,000 scrimmage yards.
There was a moment where, what year was Miles drafted?
19.
So before they drafted Miles, Wendell actually had the most rushing yards under Doug Peterson.
Okay. I mean, he was battling for playing time with Josh Adams. That's never a good sign.
Well, Josh Adams led the team in rushing in 1 year.
Yes, he did.
536 or something.
Yeah, and they were all in like 4 games. That was a weird year. But, yeah, Riley, Big V, Gainwell, Nate Gary, Wendell Smallwood. Yeah.
Fine. And Deion Lewis was left off, who ended up having a nice career for himself. Didn't do a ton in Philly, but then moved on and had some success elsewhere.
And gave me a great interview at 2017 Media Day in Bloomington.
Did he? Or are you being facetious? Oh, yeah. Didn't want to do it.
Was not into reminiscing about his Eagles days.
I remember he was like, when they drafted him, he was like, because at least Shady knew him and Shady liked him, where, you draft a running back when Shady's there, you could be a little worried about it because LaShawn's not the most mature when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but he was happy when they drafted Deion Lewis.
Yeah, and Deion, I think, had broken his record at Pitt for most rushing yards. Yeah, I believe. So you want to do worst 5th round picks?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have the same number 1.
Really?
I don't. Maybe not.
Clayton Thorson. Yeah, he's my worst.
He was awful.
He was the worst quarterback. Well, we saw that guy from Penn State was probably worse, but as far as the drafted guy,
yeah, he was awful.
Who was the guy from Penn State? What was his name? I don't remember his name.
Oh man, I'm drawing a blank. Didn't you have it out with his brother online or something?
Oh, he had it out with me. I didn't really care.
McGloin? Was that Matt McGloin?
Matt McGloin, yeah.
Yeah.
There were 2 of them. There was another one though. Matt McGloin. Anyway,
Trace McSorley wasn't here.
No, wait a minute. Hang on a second. I'm sorry to the guy for typing. This is the first time I've typed. Am I thinking of the wrong guy? Who's the other? Who's the other? Oh, Christian Hackenberg.
Oh, Hackenberger's bad too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hackenberg.
Not as bad as Thorson.
No, Thorson's the worst quarterback I've ever seen. He might be the worst football player I've ever seen.
Oof. I remember the first thing Doug, like we get to training camp and he's getting asked about Clayton Thorson. First thing he says is he's tall. And if that's the first thing you say about a guy, things aren't going well.
He's got some good height.
And Doug would say height.
Yeah, he did.
And I've noticed when people say that, because Doug was the first person I've been around who really says height. But there are people who say height instead of height.
Yeah, a lot of people say height.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one I like is when people say, he had a lot of arch on that ball.
I don't think I've heard that.
I hear that all the time. He had a lot of arch on that ball.
That'd be a very rigid pass. What's number two?
Who else do you have in your worst fifth round picks?
I'll go down the list for you. John Hightower, Taylor Hart, Ricky Sapp, Earl Wolf.
Yeah, we're in the same page here. I have I threw Ricky Sapp in mine, Shelton Gibson. I put John Hightower on only because he was so disappointing, because he kind of got off to a decent start.
There was something there.
I thought there was something there. He got off to a better start than Quez, and they were back to back, I think, 5th and 6th round picks the same year.
Yeah, he played like 50 snaps 4 games in a row.
He played 70 snaps in one game.
And then he was just gone forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. So we got through. I think the best will get less interesting as we go, and the worst will get more interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. Taylor Hart, I remember when he changed positions, and the reason he changed position because he was a defensive tackle, and then he was obviously deep on the depth chart, and they're at OTAs, and he was giving them looks at offensive line, and they're like, oh, you know what? That's not bad. That's not a good sign.
Never is.
I wrote the story because it's a fun story, but that was the end for him.
Yeah, it's never a good sign when they ask you to play a different position.
Yeah. All right. We good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I want to mention our on-the-clock mock draft debuts at noon on Friday, so maybe it's already out if you're listening to this. Maybe it's coming out. Check that out. It was a lot of fun. It was myself, Rube, Barrett Brooks, Ray Didinger, Danny Pomels did a great job hosting it. Fun stuff. We went through the first round. Barrett gets the honor of making both Eagles picks, but we all give our input about what we would do in that situation. And that's why mock drafts are fun. They're not going to happen, but it kind of gives us a layout of what could possibly happen. Yeah,
it was fun to do.
All right, if you enjoy
we got all 32 or all 31 picks right, would that be something?
That would be something. Impossible, but something.
Unlikely,
yeah. Bordering on impossible. All right, if you enjoy the Eagle Eye Podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe there as well. That's it. We'll talk to you next week. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye.